The Village Board recently completed a series of capital improvement-oriented workshops. During the course of those workshops, questions were raised by the Village Board and the public concerning traffic enforcement efforts, particularly within the 47th Street corridor. At this time, staff would like to provide the Village Board and Village residents with a better understanding as to what goes into traffic enforcement. What we do, how we do it, why do we do it this way, and so on. The goal is to provide factual information and data concerning traffic enforcement so that the Village Board can reflect on this information and make an informed decision going into the budget workshop in March relative to the allocation of limited village resources against other competing interests. And so the way we frame the staff presentation this evening is starting off with Ryan Gillingham, our Director of Public Works, to provide some clarification on KLWA's findings on the 47th Street speed study, as well as more generally traffic engineering standards in determining speed limits. Then we'll go to the main event, which is Chief Holub, who will present the operational staffing considerations as it relates to traffic enforcement, data, and statutory obligations by both pedestrians and motorists. And then finally, Director of Finance, Lisa Baroni, will speak to how we currently fund traffic enforcement activities, the cost of adding staff, the cost of increasing program allocation towards the part-time police officer program, and how that might impact the budget and our cost containment plan. And then I'll summarize after that with intended outcomes from staff's informational presentation. So, Ryan, take it away.
What I'm going to do is first provide a brief summary of a few traffic engineering terms, and then discuss how those traffic engineering terms relate to the 47th Street speed study. So with that, let's get started. This is a graph showing the distribution of speeds within the 47th Street corridor. This was actually from data that was collected as part of the 47th Street corridor study. The date that the data was collected was September 22nd, 2009. And so there's a few things I'd like to point out here. And you can see that from the graph, there's a normal distribution to the graph. On the left-hand side are the number of vehicles, and on the bottom, and I know the text is small here, but those are bins of various speeds. So like the bin here with the most traffic is 30 to 34 miles an hour. And so you can see the majority of people traveling on 47th Street are in that tall bin there from 30 to 34 miles an hour. The first line here that we drew is the posted speed limit of 30 miles an hour. Next to that one is the average speed of 33 miles an hour, which is an average of all of these speeds here. And then to the right is the 85th percentile speed, which is 38.5 miles per hour. What this 85th percentile speed means is that 85% of the vehicles are on this side of the line, traveling below 38.5 miles per hour. The other 15% are on this side of the line, traveling greater than 38.5 miles per hour. And the reason that this 85th percentile speed is important is national studies have shown that the lowest accident rate occurs when speed limits are set at or near the 85th percentile level. However, though, in urbanized areas, speed limits are routinely reduced to account for things such as number of roadway access locations, which would be driveways and side street locations, pedestrian activity, on-street parking, and crash history. And so in the case of 47th Street, as part of the 47th Street study, the speed was lowered to 30 miles per hour for things such as driveway locations and side streets. One of the other things that I'd like to point out is a lot of times people talk about the perception of speed. Certainly having sidewalks close to the roadway and a car goes by, it may seem that cars are going faster than what they really might be. And I know that the Chief will talk about that later as well. Also, data that's been collected, and this is just this graph turned on its side, is part of the speed signs that the police department has put up. They've also collected similar data that has a similar graph to it, albeit the speeds here are lower than what were in the 47th Street report. I surmise that most likely that's the result of that the speed limit sign was on, and so that was reflected in driver behavior. And there are two slides there that show similar distributions as well. And Chief Holub will probably talk about those later as well. Finally, I wanted to include this slide as well, as it's relevant to a lot of the conversations that we've been having. One of the recent seminars I was at and discussing best engineering practices for uncontrolled crossings, which are similar to 47th Street and 9th, is how motorists react to the various treatments that could be put on the roadway. And as you can see here, this graph here shows various treatments on the bottom here. We have the hawk signal, which is a flashing red beacon that causes vehicles to stop, to, on the right-hand side, a constant beacon, and then right here is a beacon activated. And so beacon activated would be like 47th Street and 9th. And I think the important thing, which we intuitively know, is that as drivers are asked to stop via a red light or a stop sign, motorist compliance increases. But this was part of a national study, and I thought it would be worth showing as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Howell.
Ryan, before you turn it over to Chief, can you explain the axes? What are we counting here?
These on the bottom here, and it's hard to see, at least from where I'm sitting. These are various treatments that could be applied. There's a half signal, which is a type of traffic signal, a hawk signal, which is again traffic signal that has a red beacon.
I understand that, and on the left axis is what?
Percentage of compliance. So that's saying 97% of drivers comply with those types of treatments. As you go down the list here on the various treatments, driver compliance decreases as signalization decreases, and that's what I want to show.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move to the Chief?
Yeah, can you go back a slide, please? So, not this one, but the next two. This is just using the police sign data in the 800 block. What was the other one? The 300 block. Right. So it's the same date, just moving the sign. Is that correct?
It's two different dates. Would you say it was the same date? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm asking what the difference is between these two. It's just all you've done.
Yeah, one is a sign placement in the 300 block, and I picked the date in October when school was in session. The previous one was the 800 block, also when school was in session, so the difference between the two. They were very typical of all the samples we had taken.
Super. Thanks. And that was after we reduced the speed limit to 30?
Correct.
You took this data? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anything else? Chief, you're on.
I have my patch, so you know this is my portion here. So anyway, what I broke down a little bit was a couple of things about what do we do in the police department. And I don't mean it to be law enforcement or LaGrange Policing 101, but I thought a little of that was relevant just for perspective purposes. So activity levels, our resources, our enforcement activity, and then our responsibilities on both sides. First one here is just what our activity levels are. So they've been consistent. If I get this little, where's the top one? Okay. Criminal, this is a 2-year comparison between 2009 and 2010. We made a concerted effort to shift our responsibility away from community policing and more towards driver and traffic safety enforcement. And that's reflected in the different gray bars. And you can see as of 2010, we were spending about 46% of our time on driver and traffic enforcement. Criminal call activity stayed about the same. And that's pretty routine from any police department, USA, your town, USA, that criminal call activity consumes about 10% of our time. And the rest is really a community service orientation, if you will. So kind of a broad brush. Responsibilities of patrol officers. Our department is almost exclusively patrol. These are the things we do, everything from assisting people, and that could be my pilot light burned out, that could be where the heck is Brookfield Zoo, I need assistance, I've locked my keys in my car, down the road enforcing laws, and that not only includes traffic laws but criminal laws as well, investigating crimes, day-to-day services in the community. If we don't have a crossing guard show up, we don't leave a crossing that goes unprotected. So parking enforcement might move up to that. If we have a number of them, like we had on some of this inclement weather, we still do those day-to-day services. And I often joke with police officers, How many times did you dream about being a police officer helping the kids across the street? But maybe not, maybe wouldn't make a TV show, but it's part of the reality of what you do at this level in policing. Keep traffic moving, not only for clogs or congestion, but even after accidents. We've all been stuck in Gapers Block after accidents. Maintaining order, resolving conflicts, those two really consume quite a bit of our time. We do a lot of domestic calls, we do a lot of business disputes. So sometimes we wear the hat of mediator as well. Make referrals to other agencies. We have a wide resource of referrals to everything from anger management to counseling on cases of abuse to substance abuse. We make a lot of referrals to other agencies, or in many cases when things are outside of our jurisdiction. It's not unusual that with the confusing layers of policing that we have in our society today, that people come and they say, well, you know, I had an accident on 294 at the Dempsey or Dempster Road toll booth, but I live in LaGrange. That's a referral to another agency. So we do that. And then something that we spend quite a bit of time on, writing reports. Everything we do is documented. I often joke that never makes any of the Law and Order shows. It would be the most boring television show you've ever watched, but it's what we spend a lot of time on, it's what our cases are made on, and it's what drives our history. So a very important role in the police department. Activity trends. I did a comparison here. The whole left bars are calls for service where our police officer is assigned compared with traffic citations. So you can see for a while, and this is a 9-year trend going back from 2010, we stayed consistently at around 10,000 calls for service until 06, and then they went up a little bit for two reasons. One, the success of downtown, and secondly, we recategorized crimes that weren't being captured before. So we actually did a better job of data collection, which sometimes you pay the price of because it looks like your crime went up, but it was the right way to do things. You can also see that there's a consistent decline in the traffic tickets. As our calls for service went up, we had less time to do enforcement. Now again, since we've made a concerted effort to refocus, you see in these last 2 years in 09 and 10, even though our call volume stayed consistent at just around 19,000, a little over 19,000 calls for service, we spent much more time on traffic enforcement. So just a little bit of comparison there. Mark.
Chief, I don't want to jump ahead if it's going to be on your screen, but can you tell us, or tell us if you're going to, how many patrolmen you have in the department and how many are in the shifts, and if that's changed at all?
Yeah, that's coming. All right. Call requirements versus our resources. So last year, 19,193 calls for service. That just wasn't 19,193 assignments, because we actually had 38,000 plus calls for assignment, and it's based on this logic. About a third of our calls require only one officer. About another third require 2 officers, and another third on average require 3 or more officers. So that math drives the 38,000 calls for assignment. Time. Taking all our time allocations, about half of our calls take 15 minutes or less. Another quarter take 15 to 30 minutes, and then the last quarter take 30, 60, or sometimes even more time for that. So, when we looked at what that equates to, took how much time we have available on some standard principles of how many hours they work in a year and time off, and we have 28 sworn police officers. 3 of them are not assigned to patrol. That's me, even though I'm a sworn officer, and our 2 investigators. But even my senior supervisors, and you see one of them here, Lieutenant Strasser, who runs the afternoon shift, she is assigned to patrol. The 3 lieutenants also split their time between administrative duties and patrol. We don't have deputy chiefs or commanders here, so I commit our lieutenants to doing double duty. They split their time between patrol and administrative functions. So with 25 officers assigned to patrol on those call assignments, what that broke down to was about an 80-20 split. 80% of our time was committed, and committed times would mean we were actually assigned to a call or doing the associated follow-up work. Associated follow-up work would be, for example, after a traffic accident. If there was an accident with 3 cars, so there's lane blockage and an injury, we might have 2 or 3 officers assigned to that. until we could get traffic flowing, until we could get an injured party on the way to the hospital. So possibly in 15 minutes or so, 2 of those units would be cleared. 1 unit would still say assigned to either follow up at the hospital or continue with the accident report. That's an example of all committed time. And then 20% of the time is when we do our random patrols, our traffic enforcement, neighborhood park patrols, foot patrols in the CBD, or other type of accidents or activities, self-generated activities. In fact, our half-hour lunch breaks are even included in this non-committed time. Although on lunch breaks, officers are subject to call back off lunch break at any time. It's not like you're out of touch. So to your question, that's a little bit of a breakdown. Our shifts are split with 9, 9, and 7. There's 9 on the day shift, 9 on the afternoon shift, and 7 on the midnight shift. It's based on call line and activity. Between afternoons and midnights, it's almost an even split of what they do on a midnight shift, as you might guess. Predictably, it goes down quite a bit.
And are there 3 then assigned of the 9, 9, and 7? How many work on Monday or Tuesday?
It's a pretty complicated schedule to cover it 24/7. Our officers don't work a conventional 5-day with 2 days off. They work a 6 days on and 2 days off for a pattern of 4 weeks, and then they work 2 weeks of 5 days and 3 off. That winds up giving them 3-day weekends every so often, and it rotates so that everybody has a chance to at least have a couple weekends off a year. And that's how it works. So the average shift, we'll have 4 cars assigned to it. That's what you have. And it's with always a supervisor working. Supervisors aren't allowed to be off at the same time. I have some pretty strict rules about the lieutenants and sergeants. They have to coordinate with each other. They can't all be gone. Obviously, we want someone with authority that has that supervisory level. So it's kind of how it's split up. I was after a quick glance over. Okay, now, when we do traffic, we don't have people that are just assigned as traffic officers because all officers have that responsibilities. So I don't mean to confuse you by saying there are traffic officers, but what do we do when we do traffic enforcement? That's what this slide is intended to show. So we enforce traffic laws. Enforcing could be with the mere presence of a radar unit. It could be the mere presence around a school or sitting near a stop sign. We also do radar with moving units, which means that on a street, for example, like Ogden or LaGrange Road, we can be moving, we'll use LaGrange Road, for example, we could be moving southbound and clocking northbound traffic. So it's a moving radar system. So we can do radar at a fixed spot, or we can do radar with moving units. So we often do moving because it gives us a better opportunity to be patrolling at the same time that we're doing radar enforcement. We direct and control traffic. Again, this is a function of around the schools, around any congestion, obviously parades, accidents to keep traffic flowing. We provide direction and assistance to motorists. One thing we try and do whenever possible is to minimize the amount of delays on our streets. So if a motorist is stranded in the middle of a traffic lane, that's us. We're the ones that can be out there. We investigate motor vehicle accidents, obviously. We provide emergency assistance at the scene. No disrespect to our firefighters, but we're generally on the scene a little bit before they are, just because we're out there already. And it may be that the officers have to do that emergency first aid, or certainly a form of triage in identifying what may be needed. Oftentimes, traffic crashes are not reported with injuries, and once we arrive, we determine that there are in fact injuries. So we have to do that. And then we gather information related to traffic. And that's not only after a crash has occurred, but oftentimes I'll ask officers to take a look at things. For example, watch a street and see how many rotations of a traffic light it takes the last car that's jammed up to make it to a left-hand turn. That might be important for me because maybe I could appeal to IDOT, or whoever controls the lights, and say, look, there seems to be a void in traffic east-west, but a really long delay in left-hand turners north and south. Maybe I could convince them if we can get the data to steal a couple of seconds of time, and even 10 seconds of time at a traffic light is a significant amount of time, and make those kind of suggestions. So we gather information related to traffic all the time. We also do this on things like stop sign assessments. You've heard us talk about the warrants, what's required for a stop sign. So we'll have officers do pedestrian counts. We'll have officers do vehicle counts. We'll have them do speed control things. We're not out there for the sole purpose of enforcement, but rather to see if there's information related to traffic that might help us. And if you go back to the couple signs we talked about with the portable speed signs, we collect data off of those signs as well. They are not as accurate as what KLOA can do for us because they're based on a fundamental radar system, and it can't distinguish between direction, so it collects both directions of traffic. But it helps us get a general idea of times. It breaks down speeds into bins, like Ryan was talking about. It also breaks down the data collected into time things. So we can take a look at it, and I can say to one of my officers, hey, Jim, I need you to go on this street at this time because it's showing that we have a spike in traffic over this time period, or we have a spike in speed in this particular time. So we gather the data off of that, and we print that out for the officers, distribute it to the supervisors. They'll see it on the roll call things, and they'll talk about it. Okay, and Lieutenant Strasser may say, okay, I need someone to be over on Brainerd at this amount of time because we've seen these kind of spikes. So all about traffic. What's the goal? What's the goal of all this? Obviously, with any traffic program, voluntary compliance. It's not our goal to trick people into committing violations. That would be the worst. We want to get people to be compliant with the law. And we think by being mobile in different locations, we do a pretty fair job of that. One of the indicators that I was real happy about was looking at our statistics. Last year, we had a 16.6% decline in traffic accidents. So for the first time in many years, we've been about 700 or more accidents per year. We had 599 accidents last year, which I thought was a pretty good indicator of our efforts to do the voluntary compliance thing and our kind of went consistently with our focus on traffic and enforcement. Sometimes it's an intangible. It's like, how many crimes did you prevent? Well, we don't know, but sometimes the comparison about the best way to indicate how much crime went down is by the lack of crime. And I think that sometimes our best test on how well we're doing on our traffic enforcement program is these decreases in traffic accidents. So I was happy to see a 16.6% decline in traffic accidents. Last year, we did 8,000 traffic stops. That's pretty significant for a town of 25 officers. Especially, the lieutenants, quite frankly, even though they're assigned to patrol, the lieutenants aren't doing the bulk of the traffic stops, but they do make traffic stops. In fact, you may see me, I make traffic stops. In fact, I freak out the dispatchers when they hear me calling a traffic stop because they don't really know why I'm calling them, so they get a little bothered by that. But we all are sworn officers. We all are capable of making traffic stops. And last year we made 8,000 traffic stops. Now we document our traffic stops. We have to. Since 2000 we've been mandated to document our traffic stops. But we break them down. We also do a little bit of another study. Why are we stopping people? What are the reasons for our traffic stop? You can see 2/3 of our traffic stops are for moving violations. And about 23 to 22% of them are for equipment violations. This would be things like busted tail lights, no headlights, no fenders, equipment violations on trucks. We do a lot of equipment violations on the trucks that we stop. And then the last portion there, 12%, is license or registration violations. No licenses, no ICC stickers on trucks, no license plates at all, something along those lines, or driving while suspended, driving while revoked, or unlicensed driving. Type of moving violations, of that 2/3 that we have here, what's the breakdown of those? Top one, at almost half, speed violations, followed by seat belts, lane violations, and such. That's just a rough breakdown. In the other category, a lot of things fall into it, but one thing I did want to highlight too is what we've been focusing on quite a bit: illegal cell phone usage. We've been writing a lot of those citations in the school zones, and a lot of them in the areas around parks. We wrote over 150 of those last year. And sadly, the vast majority of them were residents on cell phones in school zones. Speed sign placement. I thought it was interesting that over 2 years since we've been using our 4 speed signs, I stand corrected, 3 speed signs, we had 1 stolen, sadly. But we've done 209 separate postings of the speed signs throughout the village. Those signs go up for a minimum of 3 days and sometimes up to 7 days, depends on weather conditions which drive battery life. But just a listing of some of the locations where we put them in those 209 separate postings. What we like about them, you can see Dave Coderville, Officer Coderville placing the sign. They're portable, they're thin, they're durable, they're very brilliant, they're pretty noticeable, and we usually post them underneath a conventional speed limit sign. So it'll say 30 miles per hour, for example, and then your speed displayed there. And we have the ability to adjust them to do different things, flash, throw a strobe light out there. But they've been a very versatile purchase for us. And rather than one gigantic sign that we tow around to a location, we bought these 4 and we're able to move them around. And a lot of these are based on requests from people that say, my street is the worst in the village, they're speeding down my street, so we put a sign up there and we give them an idea of what it actually is. It kind of goes to what Ryan's perception is. The average citizen, and this isn't meant as a criticism as much as it is an observation, the average citizen really does not do a good job estimating speed, especially when it involves accidents. That car was doing 60 miles an hour. Well, when you find out that it was only doing 28 or 30 or something like that. It's not easy to estimate speed, especially when you see a single car. Larger vehicles tend to be estimated at going faster than they actually are, like a big trailer tractor rig doing 30 miles an hour always looks faster than a car doing 30 miles an hour. And I always tell people, when you see a car that's going 30, you think it might be going 35, but when you're doing 30, you think you're going 25. You think you're traveling slower.
Chief Ryan also made the point that sometimes people will drive slower when they see the signs illuminated than when the sign is not illuminated. Does the data support that? Can you collect the data when the sign is not illuminated and find that people are driving 39 versus 35?
Yes, then it doesn't support that. What we found out is the first couple months that we had it, when the strobe light went off, people thought their picture was being taken, so they were slowing down. Sadly, we came to find out that they recognized that they were cautionary and advisory only. So what we do is we mix up a sign with the following day a real police officer. So if they do get lax because they think there's no other enforcement that goes along with the notice, then we have an officer there.
Well, I think you came to a different conclusion than my question. So when the sign is not illuminated, people will drive faster? Is that?
No, I think I understood your question. Maybe I just answered it correctly. There was no difference between the sign being illuminated or not illuminated. People were doing the same thing. Sorry if I was confusing on that.
Okay.
Yeah, we found no difference. And the only time we ever found a difference, what I was trying to explain was early on when we had the signs, and we actually had people calling up to confess, saying, that was me, please don't mail the ticket to my home, because they thought it was actually a photo being taken. That went away pretty quick. Sad to report. So,
Hey, Mike, it's follow up on Jim's. I'm not sure if I understood the question and the answer. When you're saying illuminated, were you saying that...
we can collect the data whether those numbers showing or not.
Right, okay, so the numbers are off, so you collect the data while they're going, but there's nothing showing versus the strobe light versus the non-strobe light.
Correct. So no real significant difference between whether we had those numbers showing or not showing. Stealth mode, it's called. We can still collect the data in stealth mode.
Okay. So the conclusion earlier, I think someone mentioned, Mr. Ryan, or you might, when the sign was going, the speeds tend to be lower than the KLA numbers. Is that because of the inconsistencies or the not as granular of equipment that the KLA might have used?
Correct.
That you mentioned?
Yeah, their equipment is much more accurate than ours.
Gotcha.
Ours can even collect doubles, for example. Ours might collect 2 vehicles, and it'll look like a 70, when actually it's one doing 36 and one doing 34. That's just the uniqueness of radar.
How much are these signs?
$4,200 a piece.
And are there more accurate ones that would serve, they could collect better data?
The best collection of data is the hoses or the counters like they use. And we knew when buying these that they weren't going to be the most accurate reporting, but they still give us a great deal of information regarding trends, counts, and still pretty good for us to identify where we should put people and when we should put them there.
Do we have those hoses as well?
The police department doesn't?
No, we don't.
No.
We don't have them. And the other benefit that we get from the signs is raising public awareness. fact that they know that we're out there.
Yes, it's just, my initial premise when I heard the earlier part of the argument was if we had these signs out, they're slowing traffic down, which is the goal, right? And so, but it sounds like what you're saying is not really. A couple days and people are just basically ignoring the speed limit and driving faster than the policy.
And I would have rather said that in a closed meeting than in an open meeting, because now everybody watching knows it. Yes, sadly,
We're already doing it.
sadly.
So Chief, there's no point in buying dummy signs, I'll call them, signs that don't have any capabilities whatsoever?
Yeah, I
just to
think
let
there is.
people think that...
I think there is, because I think that the pattern that we're showing there is that even though the sign may be up, you're never going to know when there's a police officer at the next block or not.
Mhm.
So that's been good for us.
So if we bought a bunch of $200 signs that did nothing but screw to a sign, then would we affect slower speeds? Is, I guess, the essence of my question.
I don't know. It's a pretty big speculation. I don't know that I could really. I'm not comfortable making that speculation.
Well, I think actually, Chief, what I think your data is suggesting is that, and I have a variance, and that is without the devices that raise awareness, traffic still in the 85th percentile. Vast majority of traffic is reasonably within the speed limit or just above it.
Correct, and I complimented his Kale OA study from 47th Street with those two slides, just because that's what we were seeing too. When you see 33 is the average speed there, that's pretty much what we've been seeing on 47th Street as well.
So my point is that to saturate the community with signs or some sort of highly rotative circulation may not necessarily have the return on the investment.
Correct, I would agree with that. Who are we stopping? We are mandated. What I'm showing here, this is a data collection card, and it's primarily demographics. Since 2000, January of 2000, we've been mandated to collect data on every traffic stop we make. So there have been 8,000 traffic stops, hence 8,000 of these have to be completed on every traffic stop, whether or not there's a citation issue. So if I pull you over and say, you rolled that sign a little bit, can you tighten up your stop? I can't just say, go ahead on your way. I have to fill out a data collection card on you. What does that do? They collect demographics on it. They collect data on who we're stopping and why we're stopping. We are stopping almost predominantly Caucasians and 60% males. That's what the demographics show on ours. And then we have these other categories. Now, one thing just you'll note, which is a little pet peeve of mine, those 5 categories listed are the only categories that we're able to report in. If I were to stop somebody from the Middle East, what category do I put them in? There is no other category. So we are then forced to make a decision about where that person might be represented. So I think the document on its face is incomplete, and I only say that because I was in Springfield testifying it when then Senator Obama was introducing this. But we have to do this and have been having to do this consistently since 2000.
Chief, I remember when this was a state law. Is that the only jurisdiction, or has there been a federal law subsequently?
No, it's only state by state. The original design was that it was going to be for 3 years.
Right, I remember.
It was extended out another 4 years, and the last proposal, which didn't pass, was that it was going to be always required. But what we saw, and frankly what we saw in Illinois, was something that was predicted by every other state that did this, that we would probably see about a 40% drop-off in traffic enforcement. And the only explanation I can offer is not one I'm proud to say, but it's a lot of work. And frankly, I think some officers just took the easier path. But I thought it was just interesting to show you who we're stopping and what that breakdown is. We've implemented, since a couple of years ago, we implemented something to help us, because as our call volume went up, as you saw earlier, we had less opportunities to do traffic enforcement. So we developed an idea. We worked with our police officers, we worked with their labor union at the time, to develop a way where we could provide some sustained presence at some of these high visibility areas. And if any of you have ever talked to me, you know that one of my priorities during the school year is around the schools. And we have 8 public schools that we're watching in the morning. That means we have trying to spread 3 or 4 cars to watch 8 schools. That's my priority. I really want them watching the schools. I want the travel paths, the travel routes watched, and that's been a priority for me. How are we able to do that? People say, well, that's when we want you doing traffic enforcement. So we developed this part-time program. We were able to do some focused, directed patrols without drawing from our full-time staff. And we could do a sustained presence. So we identify opportunities. And this represents just this year of the part-time officers' activities. So, at the bottom I included just what that broke down to: 830 citations, they made 667 stop cards, they even wrote some parking tickets and did some foot patrols. These are officers that are fully trained police officers. And matter of fact, they're full-time police officers elsewhere. So we take advantage of their skill. We haven't had to train them. They've been trained by somebody else. And we ask them to focus their time primarily on traffic and pedestrian. And those two bars in each of those categories represent that. It represents traffic tickets and it represents stop cards. Those are the top two categories. These other categories down here, the lower ones in each are parking tickets, foot patrols, and such. So they have been focusing on that. This drop-down represents a drop-off in the funding and the staffing of the part-time officers. Part of a little financial program we tried last year, we cut back the funding for part-time officers by 50%. So it drops off a little bit. But I just thought you'd like to see what our part-time officers have contributed. And once again, what we like about their presence is they're sustained. They're not subject to the primary call in a zone. They can stay at a spot. Now they can do other things as well. So for example, if Lou was one of my officers assigned to beat 3 and gets assigned to handle a battery at the pick a location, one of the part-time officers can then be redirected to fill that beat while he's doing that paperwork on the other call. So that area of control does not go unresponsive. So they're versatile and they're multifunctional. It was what we did when we proposed it to this body to have the public forum on it. We wanted these people to be full-time trained, and they are. And we've got a good corps.
Chief, in this graph, can you show us the number of man hours per month?
No, I do. I don't have that. I don't know what that is offhand. But we funded based on a dollar amount, and then judiciously, we work them into the shifts. We know what the average pay is. They get paid about $20 an hour average, and you routinely see them working 4 or 5 hours a day, focusing on the morning rush and the evening rush. They don't do much on the midnight shift at all. 40 hours. Lou's telling me about 40 hours total for the part-time program for all of us.
Per week.
Per week.
Mike, excuse my ignorance, what's a stop card?
Stop card is what I showed you earlier. This would be a stop card here. So that meant they probably were stopped and given a pass.
Okay, so go forward one more time. So of the, if I remember correctly, 1,800 stops, we wrote 830 tickets. Is that correct?
This is just representative of the part-time officers. This is just representative of the part-time corps.
Okay. So how many? Several slides ago, you had how many stops we made?
8,000 traffic stops.
Right. How many of those resulted in a citation, something that cost somebody some time, some effort, some money, versus a warning?
My guess it would be around 60%.
Okay, thanks.
Part-time officers probably dealing more with the residents, and we give them some parameters on discretion. One of the biggest debates in traffic is, can I get a break if somebody gets pulled over for a traffic violation? We do allow officers the use of discretion. We give them parameters. There's obviously some very serious tickets they get no discretion on. But a minor speeding violation, a roll stop sign, that might fall into the category of the set parameters that we give officers instruction on. We give them guidance to help them make a decision on the discretion, and they can use their discretion. That's part of the traffic program, though. I think that giving somebody a pass on a stop sign violation can be just as effective, and we've seen that. We've seen that result.
Right.
Thanks.
Hey, Mike, last year I know you You expressed the concern you expressed tonight about the increased time in downtown, the extra potential beat on its own.
Yes.
And then we have the reduction that you spoke of. Would you call it successful? We're able to reduce those, was that 50% that cut something that we shouldn't have done now in retrospect, now with the analysis?
It's hard for me to put it that way because we were still able to utilize the part-time officers, but not because of the conventional funding. We were able to use the judicial advisory grant funds to hire them back, and we couldn't use them in these programs here. We wound up just shifting them a little bit to the foot patrols in the business district because that still remained a priority for us because of the call line down there. So we still were able to use those officers. This went down though because their role was just morphed from the traffic enforcement to the CBD patrols. If that answers it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're saying that it was a direct result. I mean, the cutback and the refocus of some of the time resulted in the decline in the
Correct.
traffic enforcement time
Correct.
spent. Okay.
Next slide. I'll get into a little bit of the law.